The air in the great hall tasted of smoke and expectation. Pine logs crackled in the massive stone fireplace, sending sparks spiraling toward the vaulted ceiling where shadows danced like restless spirits. The scent of roasted meat mingled with something sharper. Fear, perhaps, or the metallic tang of dominance that always hung thick during the matching ceremony. I pressed myself against the cold stone pillar near the servants' entrance, making myself small, invisible, the way I'd learned to do over 23 years of being nothing. Around me, the pack celebrated. Laughter erupted in sharp bursts. Glasses clinked. The eligible wolves, alphas, betas, even a few confident omegas, circled each other with practiced grace, their movements a choreographed dance of power and submission I'd never been taught. My fingers twisted in the worn fabric of my dress, the only decent one I owned, though decent was generous. The gray cotton hung loose on my frame, deliberately shapeless. I'd learned early that attention was dangerous for someone like me, someone worthless. The word echoed in my mind in my father's voice, cold and final as winter. He'd said it 3 days ago when he'd shoved the invitation into my hands. They're requiring all unmated wolves to attend, even you. Try not to embarrass us more than you already have, my wolf whimpered inside me, a small, broken sound. She'd been quiet for so long now, ever since that night 2 years ago when Damien, golden, perfect Damien, had looked at me with disgust and said the words that still carved through my chest like claws. I, Damien Cross, reject you as my mate. The moon goddess made a mistake. You're not strong enough, not beautiful enough, not enough of anything. The bond had snapped. I'd felt something inside me break that couldn't be named, couldn't be mended. And my wolf, already weak, had retreated so deep I sometimes forgot she existed at all. I shouldn't have come tonight, but disobedience wasn't an option when the Alpha King himself issued the decree. Every unmated wolf between 18 and 30, present and accounted for, no exceptions. Even the rejects, even me. My gaze drifted across the hall, cataloging the faces I'd known my entire life. There was Sarah, her red dress clinging to curves I'd never have, laughing too loudly at something a visiting alpha said. Marcus and Tom, twin betas from the northern border, scanning the crowd with predatory interest, and there, near the head table, sat the council elders, their expressions stern beneath their gray beards, as they observed the proceedings with the gravity of judges at a trial. The head table. My heart stuttered. He sat there like a storm-given form, all dark power and terrible beauty. Alpha King Caden Thorne. I'd never seen him in person before. Our pack was small, insignificant, tucked away in the mountains where important wolves never bothered to visit. But he'd arrived 3 days ago with an entourage of warriors and whispers, declaring he'd observe our local matching ceremony before moving on to the next territory. No one knew why. Speculation had run wild through the pack. Some said he was looking for something. Others whispered he was testing the strength of his kingdom's bloodlines after the recent attacks from the rogue clans in the east. A few romantics claimed he was searching for his true mate, though at 35 and unmated, most assumed he'd never find her, or didn't want to. From my shadowed corner, I could see him clearly. Dark hair, almost black, fell just past his collar in waves that somehow looked both careless and deliberate. His jaw was sharp enough to cut, his features arranged in an expression of such profound boredom, I might have found it amusing if I weren't so terrified. He wore black, of course he did, tailored perfectly to shoulders that needed no exaggeration. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame, making everyone in the room either lean toward him unconsciously or skitter away in nervous respect. His fingers drummed once against the wooden armrest of his chair. That was all, one gesture. But I saw 3 wolves straighten immediately, their conversations faltering. I wondered what it felt like to command a room without speaking. To exist with such certainty of your place in the world that you didn't have to shrink or hide or apologize for the space you occupied. Attention! Elder Richard's voice boomed across the hall. The first matching will now commence. My stomach twisted. I should leave. Slip out through the servants' door and disappear into the kitchens where I'd be more useful anyway. No one would notice. No one ever did. But I couldn't move. Something held me frozen against that pillar, watching as Sarah stepped forward with manufactured shyness, her eyes fixed on a visiting alpha from the Western Territories. The elder spoke the traditional words. The alpha accepted. Applause rippled through the crowd like water. Another pair stepped forward, then another. Each successful matching felt like a small knife between my ribs. Not because I wanted what they had, I'd learned not to want things beyond my reach, but because each pairing reinforced what everyone already knew. I didn't belong here. Among these confident, beautiful wolves who knew their value and wore it like armor, the room grew warmer, or perhaps that was just me, heat creeping up my neck as I realized how exposed I was despite my corner shadows. A few pack members had glanced my way, their expressions ranging from pity to contempt. I recognized Michael, one of Damien's friends, whispering something to his companion. They both looked at me and laughed. My face burned. My wolf stirred, not in defense but in shame, and I pushed her back down, feeling nothing was easier. "I need air," I whispered to no one, finally forcing my feet to move. I'd slip out, walk the outer corridors for a few minutes until my lungs remembered how to work properly, then return before anyone marked my absence as disrespect. The servants' entrance led to a narrow hallway lit by torches. The sounds of the celebration faded to a muffled roar behind me. I pressed my palm against the stone wall, letting the cold seep into my skin, counting breaths the way I'd taught myself during panic attacks. 1, 2, 3. Pathetic, I muttered. "Can't even handle a party. Talking to yourself, Omega?" I spun. A woman stood at the corridor's far end, her silhouette backlit by torchlight. As she stepped closer, I recognized her. Vivian Cross, Damien's cousin, and one of the pack's most eligible she-wolves. Beautiful in that effortless way some women were, with honey-colored hair and eyes that sparkled with perpetual amusement at other people's misfortunes. "I was just leaving," I said quietly, dropping my gaze to the floor as was expected. "Were you?" She moved closer, and I caught the scent of expensive perfume. "Strange. It looked like you were hiding. Tell me, did you really think coming here would change anything? That some desperate alpha might overlook what you are?" The words landed with practiced precision. I'd heard variations of them my entire life, but they still found their mark, still drew blood. "I came because it was required," I managed. "How dutiful." Her smile was sharp. "Well, since you're here, you should know. Damien's going to announce his engagement tonight. To me, I thought you'd want to hear it from a friendly source rather than be blindsided." My wolf whimpered. I felt nothing. Everything. Nothing. "Congratulations," I heard myself say. "You'll be very happy together." Vivian laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "We will. He needs a strong mate, you understand. Someone who can stand beside him. Not a broken little thing that... Is there a problem here?" The new voice cut through the corridor like a blade, deep and commanding and absolutely arctic in its calm. We both turned. A man stood at the hallway's entrance. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that caught the torchlight and held it. Not the Alpha King, but someone who clearly belonged to his inner circle. His presence filled the narrow space, making Vivian's confidence falter for the first time. "No problem," Vivian said quickly, her tone shifting to something sweeter, more deferential. "Just chatting with an old friend." His gaze moved to me, assessing. I must have looked as pathetic as I felt. Pressed against the wall, red-eyed, small. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those sharp eyes. Not pity, something else. "The Alpha King wants all attendees in the Great Hall," he said. "No exceptions." "Of course, we were just heading back." Vivian brushed past me, her shoulder knocking mine hard enough to hurt, deliberate in its casualness. Her footsteps echoed as she disappeared toward the hall. I started to follow, but the man didn't move, blocking the corridor. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What's your name?" he asked. No one ever asked my name. People in the pack knew me as the Omega Girl, or that one, or simply didn't acknowledge me at all. "Elena," I whispered. "Elena Wright." He nodded once, as if confirming something. Then he stepped aside, letting me pass. I hurried back toward the great hall, my mind spinning. Why had he asked? Why had he intervened at all? Warriors in the Alpha King's guard didn't involve themselves in pack squabbles, especially not over someone like me. The celebration had intensified in my absence. More couples had matched. The ale flowed freely now, loosening tongues and lowering inhibitions. I found another pillar, a different one, farther from the head table, and pressed myself against it, trying to become stone. That's when I felt it. Eyes on me. Not the dismissive glances I'd endured all night, but focused, intense attention that raised every hair on my arms. Slowly, against my better judgment, I looked up and met the gaze of Alpha King Caden Thorne. He was staring directly at me, his expression unreadable, but his attention absolute. The drumming fingers had stopped, the boredom had vanished. For a moment that stretched into eternity, the entire room seemed to fall away until there was only him and me, and the impossible weight of his focus. My wolf suddenly surged forward, awake for the first time in 2 years, howling something that sounded like recognition, like relief, like terror. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. His hand gripped the armrest of his chair until his knuckles went white. Then he leaned toward the warrior standing beside him, the same man from the corridor, I realized, and spoke 2 sentences. I couldn't hear the words over the noise of the celebration, but I watched his lips move, watched the warrior's eyes widen fractionally before his expression went carefully blank. The warrior descended from the platform, crossed the hall, every step deliberate, measured, terrifying. He stopped in front of me. The conversations nearby died. Wolves turned to stare. When he spoke, his voice carried across the suddenly silent hall, clear and formal, and absolutely final. Elena Wright, the Alpha King requests your presence. You are to come with me immediately. The world tilted. Someone gasped. Whispers exploded around me like wildfire. I saw my father's face across the room, frozen in shock. Saw Vivian's expression twist into something ugly. Saw Damien staring with his mouth open. The warrior extended his hand, waiting. I looked past him to the head table, to the Alpha King who still watched me with that unreadable intensity. His eyes were dark, impossibly dark, and in them I saw something that made my broken wolf sing and my terrified heart stop. Now, the warrior said quietly, not unkindly. He doesn't like to wait. My hand, pale and trembling, reached out and grasped his. The hall erupted in chaos around us, but I heard none of it. Because the Alpha King had risen from his chair, his gaze never leaving mine as I crossed the floor toward him, led by his guard like a prisoner or a prize. And just before I reached the platform, he turned to the man beside him and spoke words that would change everything. Bring her to my room. The corridors of the visiting Alpha's wing twisted like a labyrinth through the pack house, each turn taking me farther from everything familiar. The warrior, who'd introduced himself curtly as Garrett, head of the King's Guard, walked 3 paces ahead, his posture military straight, his silence absolute. My footsteps echoed too loudly against the stone floor, each sound a reminder that I was walking toward something I couldn't comprehend. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. The shocked faces of my packmates, my father's expression, hovering somewhere between horror and opportunistic calculation. Vivian's fury, and Damien. Gods. Damien had actually stepped forward as if to object before his father gripped his shoulder and forced him back into his seat. But louder than all of that was the Alpha King's voice, low and absolute. Bring her to my room. Not bring her to the conference chamber, or bring her to speak with the council. To his room. The implications made my stomach twist into knots. My wolf paced restlessly inside me, more alert than she'd been in 2 years. I could feel her pressing against my consciousness, trying to tell me something I couldn't quite understand. She wasn't afraid. That terrified me more than anything else. Why wasn't she afraid? Garrett stopped before a heavy wooden door at the corridor's end. Intricate carvings covered its surface. Wolves mid-hunt. Moons in various phases, symbols I didn't recognize that seemed to shimmer in the torchlight. He knocked twice, a specific rhythm that sounded like code. Enter. The Alpha King's voice penetrated the wood as if it weren't there at all. Garrett pushed open the door and gestured me inside. I hesitated, every survival instinct screaming at me to run. But where would I go? Back to the pack that had spent 23 years teaching me I was worthless. Back to my father who'd probably already calculated how to profit from this bizarre situation. I stepped inside. The room was larger than my entire living quarters at home. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, its dark coverings perfectly arranged despite looking soft enough to sink into. Bookshelves lined another wall, crammed with volumes whose spines bore titles in languages I didn't recognize. A fireplace crackled with fresh logs, casting dancing shadows across thick carpets that swallowed sound. Weapons hung on the walls, not decorative pieces but working blades, each one lovingly maintained, each one deadly. And in the center of it all, standing before the window with his back to me, was the Alpha King. He didn't turn immediately, just stood there, silhouette dark against the moonlight streaming through the glass, his shoulders rigid with something that might have been tension. The silence stretched until my nerves felt like bowstrings pulled too tight. "Garrett," he said quietly, "wait outside. Let no one disturb us." "Your Majesty." The door clicked shut with a finality that made me flinch. We were alone. An unmated Omega and the most powerful Alpha in the kingdom, alone in his private chambers. Every cautionary tale I'd ever heard screamed through my mind. I should have been terrified. I was terrified, but beneath the fear, something else stirred. That strange alertness from my wolf. That sense of recognition I couldn't explain. "Do you know why I called you here, Elena Wright?" My name and his voice sounded different, like it meant something. I swallowed hard, forcing words past my tight throat. "No, Your Majesty. Look at me when you speak." It was a command, gentle in delivery but absolute in expectation. I raised my eyes slowly, fighting every instinct that told me to keep them lowered, to stay small and safe and invisible. He'd turned to face me. Up close, he was even more overwhelming than he'd been from across the hall. Tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. Beautiful in that harsh, unforgiving way that mountains were beautiful. All sharp edges and dangerous angles. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Dark as midnight, yes, but not empty. I saw intelligence there, and weariness, and something that looked almost like loneliness, before he shuddered it away. "Better," he murmured. "Do you always make yourself so small? Or is it only when you're afraid?" The observation cut too close to truths I didn't want to examine. "I'm not afraid." One dark eyebrow lifted fractionally. "No?" "I am," I corrected, honesty escaping before I could stop it. "But you asked if I always make myself small. The answer is yes. Always. It's safer." Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate, until he stood an arm's length away. This close I could smell him, pine and smoke, and something wilder, something that made my wolf surge forward with interest. "Safer," he repeated. "From whom?" "Everyone." The word hung between us, too honest, too raw. I watched him process it, saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I saw you tonight," he said, his voice lower now, almost conversational. "Standing alone while your pack celebrated around you, slipping away into the corridors like you thought disappearing might save you from something. And I saw that woman, Vivian Cross, I believe, cornering you in that hallway. What did she say to you?" My heart hammered. He'd been watching me that closely? For how long? "Nothing important, Your Majesty. Don't lie to me." Still gentle, but with steel underneath. "I can smell the hurt on you from here." Fresh hurt, layered over old. What did she say? I couldn't answer. Couldn't force the humiliating words past my lips. But he waited with the patience of stone. And eventually, the silence became more unbearable than the truth. "She told me her cousin, my former..." "The man who rejected me is going to announce their engagement tonight. She wanted to make sure I knew, that I understood my place. And where is your place, Elena?" The question caught me off guard. Nowhere. I don't have one." "No?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me with that unnerving intensity. A wolf without a place, that's dangerous. Wolves are pack animals. We need belonging like we need air. Without it, we become feral. Or we break entirely. Which are you? I don't know, I whispered. Both. Neither. He nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something. Then, startling me, he turned and walked to a cabinet near the fireplace, pulling out a crystal decanter and 2 glasses. He poured amber liquid into both, whiskey, judging by the scent, and held one out to me. I stared at it, not moving. It's not poisoned, he said dryly. And you look like you need it. Slowly, I reached out and took the glass. Our fingers brushed for a fraction of a second, and electricity shot up my arm. His eyes darkened. He felt it too. Drink, he ordered quietly. I sipped. The whiskey burned down my throat, harsh and grounding. He drank his in one swallow, then set the glass down with careful precision. I'm going to tell you something now, he said, turning back to face me fully, and I need you to listen carefully, because I won't repeat it. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I've been Alpha King for 12 years. In that time, I've visited hundreds of packs, attended countless ceremonies, met thousands of wolves, alphas, betas, omegas of every bloodline and strength. And in all those years, not once, not a single time, has my wolf reacted to anyone the way he reacted when I looked at you tonight. My breath caught. The glass trembled in my hand. He saw you. Caden continued, his voice rough now, raw with something I couldn't name. Standing there alone, trying to disappear, hurting in ways you thought no one noticed. And he didn't just see you, Elena. He recognized you. He knows you. I don't understand, I managed. Neither do I. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration breaking through his controlled exterior. I stopped believing in fated mates years ago, convinced myself it was a romantic myth, that the moon goddess didn't actually pair souls, that we chose our paths through logic and strategy and strength. He crossed back to me, close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. But then I saw you, and my wolf, who hasn't stirred for anyone in 35 years, woke up, started howling like he'd found something he'd been searching for his entire life. Do you know what that means? I did. Gods help me. I did. But I couldn't say it, couldn't even think it without my world tilting off its axis. It's not possible, I whispered. I'm nobody. A rejected Omega with a broken wolf. The moon goddess wouldn't. She couldn't. The moon goddess does what she wills, not what we think makes sense. His hand lifted, hovering near my face but not quite touching. I need to know. What do you feel when you look at me? What does your wolf say? Truth or safety? The question that had defined my entire life. I'd always chosen safety before, chosen silence and smallness and invisibility. But something about the way he looked at me, like I mattered, like my answer mattered, made the truth spill out despite everything. She's awake, I admitted. For the first time since the rejection, she's awake, and she's not afraid of you. She's calm, like she knows you, like she's been waiting for you. His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they were blazing with something fierce and possessive and terrifying. This complicates everything, he said. But he didn't sound upset. If anything, he sounded almost relieved. I came here to assess pack strength, to determine if these territories could withstand another rogue attack. I didn't come looking for this. For you. I'm sorry, I said automatically, the apology I'd learned to offer for simply existing. Don't. The word was sharp. Don't apologize for fate, Elena. Don't apologize for being seen. His hand finally made contact, fingers gentle against my jaw, tilting my face up to his. And don't ever apologize for what you are. Not to me, not to anyone. The touch burned. Not painfully, but like coming in from winter cold to sit beside a fire, like something frozen inside me beginning, impossibly, to thaw. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said, stepping back and putting deliberate distance between us. We figure out what this means. A bond between an alpha king and a rejected omega from a small mountain pack. It's unprecedented. It will raise questions, create problems. There are protocols, politics, expectations to navigate. Reality crashed back in. Of course. He couldn't just claim me like some fairy tale. He was a king with responsibilities, territories to protect, councils to answer to. And I was... what? A liability? An embarrassment? The story people would tell as a cautionary tale? I understand, I said quietly, my voice empty again. You don't have to explain. I know what I am, what I'm not. His expression darkened. What are you not, Elena? Enough. The word tasted like ash. I'm not enough. I wasn't enough for Damien, wasn't enough for my pack, wasn't enough for my own father. What makes you think I'd be enough for a king? He moved so fast I didn't have time to flinch. One moment he was across the room, the next he was in front of me, his hands gripping my shoulders, his face inches from mine. Listen to me very carefully, he growled, and there was alpha command in his voice now, pure dominance that made my wolf roll over in submission, while simultaneously singing with joy. I don't know what happened to you, what they did to make you believe you're worthless, but they were wrong. Do you understand? Wrong. The fact that you're still standing after being rejected, after being treated as less than, that takes a strength most wolves never have to develop. You survived, Elena. That matters. Tears burned behind my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. I need time, he said, his voice gentling. Time to handle this properly. To protect you from the fallout that's coming. Because make no mistake, when word spreads that the Alpha King has taken interest in you, your life will change. People will question, judge, attack. I need to ensure you're safe before I make any formal claims. Claims? His smile was grim. Did you think I was going to let you go? Now that I've found you? His hands slid from my shoulders down to my hands, gripping them firmly. You're mine, Elena Wright. The moon goddess marked you for me, and I don't question her wisdom, but I won't throw you to the wolves, metaphorically speaking, without preparation. I don't know how to be what you need, I confessed. Then we'll figure it out together. He squeezed my hands once before releasing them. Garrett will escort you back to the hall. You'll return to your life as it was for now, but tomorrow, things begin to change. Tomorrow, I start making arrangements. What kind of arrangements? His smile turned predatory. The kind that ensure anyone who ever hurt you learns what it means to harm what belongs to me. A knock sounded at the door. Garrett, checking in. The spell broke. Reality reasserted itself. Go, Caden said softly, before I change my mind and keep you here. I walked to the door on shaking legs. Garrett waited in the corridor, his expression carefully neutral, but just as I crossed the threshold, the Alpha King's voice stopped me. Elena. I looked back. He stood silhouetted by firelight once more, powerful and lonely and impossibly beautiful. You are enough, he said. Remember that. The door closed between us. Garrett led me back through the labyrinth of corridors in silence, but everything had changed. The air tasted different. My wolf hummed contentedly for the first time in years, and somewhere deep in my chest, where the rejected bond had left a scar, something new and terrifying and wonderful began to bloom. When I re-entered the great hall, every eye turned to me. The celebration had continued, but tension crackled through the room like lightning before a storm. I saw my father fighting his way through the crowd. Saw Vivian's poisonous glare. Saw Damien staring with something that might have been regret. But I held my head higher than I ever had before. Because tonight, the Alpha King had looked at me and seen something worth claiming, worth protecting. And tomorrow, everything would change. Morning came too quickly, and not quickly enough. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every moment in that room, every word the Alpha King had spoken, every touch that had set my skin on fire. When gray dawn light finally crept through my small window, I was already awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of my bedroom and trying to convince myself the previous night hadn't been a fever dream. But the whispers started before I even left my room. I could hear them through the thin walls. Pack members gathered in the corridors, their voices low but urgent. My father's heavy footsteps paced the hallway outside my door. He'd tried the handle twice during the night, found it locked, and retreated with muttered curses. I knew he'd be back. Everyone would want answers I didn't have. When I finally emerged, dressed in my usual faded jeans and oversized sweater, armor of a different kind, the common room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned to assess me, to search for visible changes, for proof that something had happened in the Alpha King's chambers. My stepmother, Linda, stood by the kitchen counter, her expression calculating. My half-sister, Bethany, watched from the stairs with undisguised envy. Elena. My father's voice cut through the silence like a blade. My office. Now. I followed him into the cramped space that served as his study, feeling the weight of everyone's stares on my back. He closed the door and rounded on me immediately. What did he want? No preamble, no concern for my well-being, just tactical assessment. To talk, I said carefully. Don't play games with me, girl. The Alpha King doesn't summon random Omegas to his private chambers just to talk. What did he say? What did he do? The possessive edge in his tone made my stomach turn. He'd spent 23 years making it clear I was a burden, a disappointment, barely worth the food he provided. But now, suddenly, I was interesting. Valuable. He asked me questions, I said, keeping my voice level. About the pack. About myself. Then he had me escorted back to the hall. My father's eyes narrowed. That's all? Nothing else happened? Nothing else happened. It wasn't entirely a lie. Nothing physical had happened. No claiming mark or bond acceptance. But everything had changed in ways I couldn't explain, and wouldn't share with him if I could. He studied me for a long moment, frustration warring with calculation in his expression. The king and his entourage are leaving this morning, returning to the capital. Did he give any indication he'd continue his interest? I don't know what you mean. Don't be stupid. Did he express intent to pursue you? To make any kind of arrangement? The crude assessment of the situation, reducing what I'd felt in that room to mere arrangement, made anger flare hot in my chest. My wolf growled softly, and I felt her presence more strongly than I had in years. No, I lied. I think he was just curious, nothing more. My father's disappointment was palpable. He'd probably already been planning how to leverage a connection to the Alpha King, how to elevate our family's standing through my sudden, inexplicable value. Fine, he said curtly. Then you'll continue your duties as normal. And Elena. He caught my arm as I turned to leave, his grip just shy of painful. Don't embarrass this family by spreading rumors. Whatever happened or didn't happen last night stays private. Understand? I pulled free. Understood. The morning deteriorated from there. Every task I attempted was interrupted by whispers, stares, and thinly veiled questions. In the pack kitchens where I usually helped with meal preparation, the other Omegas gave me a wide berth, their earlier camaraderie replaced with suspicion. Sarah cornered me by the supply closet, her fake smile sharp as glass. So, she purred, you must be feeling pretty special this morning, the Alpha King's personal attention. Tell me, Elena, what exactly did you do to catch his eye? I'm sure we'd all love to know your techniques. The implication was clear and wrong, but defending myself would only make things worse. I don't know why he wanted to speak with me, I said quietly. Maybe he was just being thorough, wanting to meet everyone. Right, everyone. That's why he singled you out specifically and had you brought to his chambers. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You think this changes anything? You think one night of attention makes you special? He's a king, Elena. He probably has a dozen Omegas warming his bed across the kingdom. By tomorrow, he won't even remember your name. The words found their mark, burrowing into the soft places where my insecurities lived. Maybe she was right. Maybe last night had been nothing more than curiosity or boredom or... No. I thought of the way he'd looked at me, the raw honesty in his voice when he'd spoken of his wolf's recognition. That hadn't been casual interest. That had been something else. Something real. But doubt was a familiar companion, and it settled over me like a heavy cloak as the morning dragged on. By midday, word spread that the Alpha King's convoy was preparing to depart. I told myself I wouldn't go watch, wouldn't subject myself to the spectacle of him leaving. But my feet carried me to the pack house entrance anyway, where a crowd had gathered to see off the most important visitor our territory had hosted in decades. I stayed at the back, half hidden behind a stone column, my usual position. From there, I could see the Alpha King's warriors loading supplies into black vehicles, their movements efficient and coordinated. Garrett stood by the lead car, directing operations with quiet authority. And then Caden himself emerged from the pack house, flanked by 2 advisors. Even in the harsh daylight, he was magnetic, power and control wrapped in human form. He spoke briefly with our pack's alpha, a formal exchange of pleasantries, his expression revealing nothing. He didn't look for me, didn't scan the crowd, just conducted his business with cool efficiency, every inch the king. My wolf whimpered. The fragile hope I'd been nursing since last night began to crack. Sarah had been right. I was nobody. A momentary curiosity, nothing more. I turned to leave before I could watch him drive away. But a hand caught my elbow. I spun to find Garrett standing there. His approach so silent I hadn't heard him coming. "Miss Wright?" he said formally. "A word?" Around us, conversation stopped. Everyone watched with naked curiosity as the head of the Alpha King's guard led me away from the crowd into the same quiet corridor where Vivian had cornered me the night before. "His Majesty asked me to deliver a message," Garrett said once we were alone. His expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he found this situation unusual. "He wants you to know that arrangements take time, but they're being made. You're to continue with your normal life for now, but stay alert. Changes are coming." My heart lurched. What kind of changes? That's not for me to say, but the king doesn't make empty promises. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small package wrapped in dark cloth. "He also asked me to give you this. For emergencies only." I unwrapped the cloth to find a phone. Sleek, expensive, far beyond anything I'd ever owned. A single number was already programmed into it. "That line connects directly to His Majesty's private phone," Garrett explained. "Use it only if you're in genuine danger or if the situation here becomes untenable." "Do you understand?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Good." Garrett's expression softened fractionally. "For what it's worth, Miss Wright, I've served King Caden for 8 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you last night. Whatever this is, it's not nothing." He left me standing there, the phone warm in my hands, feeling like a talisman against the doubt that had been consuming me all morning. The Alpha King's convoy departed an hour later. I watched from my bedroom window as the vehicles disappeared down the mountain road, taking him farther away with each passing second. The phone felt heavy in my pocket. A secret promise that I didn't fully understand. The days that followed were strange. Life returned to its normal rhythm on the surface. I worked in the kitchens, kept my head down, made myself small, but everything felt different now. My wolf remained active, watchful, no longer retreating into that wounded silence. And I caught myself touching the phone constantly, reassuring myself it was real. The pack's reaction to my brief moment of interest evolved from curiosity to mockery. Without the Alpha King present to witness, people felt free to express their opinions more openly. "Guess he realized his mistake," someone muttered as I passed in the hallway. "Probably couldn't get away fast enough," another agreed. Even my father's brief interest faded back into his usual dismissiveness. Bethany took particular pleasure in reminding me that Damien and Vivian's engagement had been officially announced, that the whole pack would celebrate their union in a few weeks. "You should come to the engagement party," she said with false sweetness over dinner one night. "I'm sure Damien would love to see how well you're handling everything." I said nothing, just pushed food around my plate while Linda shot me calculating looks, and my father ignored me entirely. A week passed, then another. The phone remained silent. I started to wonder if Garrett had been wrong, if the Alpha King had reconsidered whatever impulse had driven him to claim interest in me. Maybe his advisors had talked sense into him. Maybe he'd realized that a rejected Omega wasn't worth the political complications. I was working in the pack gardens on a gray afternoon, a task I'd volunteered for because it kept me outside, away from the whispers, when my wolf suddenly surged to alertness. I looked up from the herb bed I'd been weeding to find 3 strangers standing at the garden's entrance. They weren't from our pack. Everything about them screamed outsider, from their expensive clothing to the way they carried themselves with absolute confidence. The woman in front was tall and elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. The two men flanking her were clearly guards, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. "Elena Wright?" the woman asked, her voice cultured and precise. I stood slowly, dirt falling from my hands. "Yes?" "My name is Lydia Thorne. I'm the Alpha King's chief advisor." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "His Majesty sent me to speak with you. Is there somewhere private we could talk?" My heart hammered. I glanced toward the pack house, suddenly aware of the curtains twitching, the faces appearing in windows. This conversation would be observed, analyzed, reported. "The East Pavilion," I said, pointing to a small covered structure at the garden's far end. "No one uses it this time of day." We walked in silence, my mind racing. Why would the Alpha King send his chief advisor? What did this mean? Once we were sheltered under the pavilion's roof, Lydia gestured for her guards to wait at a distance. Then she turned to me with an assessing gaze that felt like it could see straight through to my bones. "You've caused quite a stir," she said without preamble. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I haven't done anything," I said, defensive. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No, I suppose you didn't." She studied me for another long moment. "His Majesty has asked me to begin certain preparations, arrangements that will allow you to transition to the capital, should you choose to accept his offer." "What offer?" "To explore the bond between you, to determine if what his wolf recognized in you is genuine." She paused. "You understand this is unprecedented? The Alpha King hasn't shown interest in anyone in over a decade, and now he wants to bring a previously rejected Omega from an insignificant pack to the royal court. The council is divided on the wisdom of this decision." The careful phrasing told me everything I needed to know. They thought I was a mistake, a liability. "I didn't ask to be noticed," I said again. "Perhaps not. But you were noticed nonetheless, and now we must all deal with the consequences." Lydia pulled a folder from her bag and opened it. "This is a contract. Standard terms for anyone entering the capital under royal interest. It includes provisions for your safety, your housing, your education and court protocols. Should things not work out, should the bond prove false or incompatible, you'll be provided with sufficient resources to establish yourself elsewhere." I stared at the papers, seeing my entire life reduced to legal terms and conditions. "And if I refuse? Then you stay here, live out your days in this pack, marry whoever will have you, if anyone. Work in the kitchens until your hands are too worn to continue. Grow old wondering what might have been." Lydia's voice wasn't unkind, just brutally honest. "Is that what you want, Elena? Because if it is, say so now. His Majesty will respect your choice." I thought of the Alpha King's words. "You're enough." Thought of his hands gripping mine, his promise to protect me from the fallout. Thought of the phone in my pocket, silent but present, and I thought of staying here, in this pack that had never wanted me, watching Damien marry Vivian while everyone whispered about the pathetic Omega who'd been rejected and forgotten. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Lydia's smile turned approving. "Sign here. Pack your belongings, what little you want to bring. My team will handle the rest. We leave for the capital tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow? That's..." His Majesty was very clear. He wants this handled quickly, before opposition can organize. She held out a pen. "The question is simple, Elena Wright. Do you want to discover what you might become? Or do you want to stay what you've always been?" My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. Behind me, I could feel my pack watching through the garden hedges, waiting to see what I'd do. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, a world I didn't understand, but also possibility, recognition. Maybe, impossibly, belonging. I signed my name. The capital rose before us like something from a dream, or a nightmare, depending on one's perspective. After 2 days of travel in Lydia's convoy, winding through mountain passes and dense forests, the city appeared suddenly as we crested a final hill. Towers of glass and steel pierced the sky alongside ancient stone structures, the old and new woven together in a tapestry of power and history. The royal complex dominated the northern quarter, its walls high and forbidding, flags bearing the king's crest snapping in the wind. I'd spent the journey in silence, watching the landscape change through tinted windows, while Lydia occasionally explained protocols, hierarchies, and expectations. Her tone remained professional, almost clinical, as if she were briefing a new employee, rather than discussing the potential mate of the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. "The court will test you," she'd said that morning as we neared the city limits. "Some will do so openly, through challenges and confrontations. Others will be more subtle. Either way, you must be prepared to prove you belong there, or at least that you're strong enough to survive." "I'm an Omega," I'd replied quietly. "I'm not strong. Strength comes in many forms, Miss Wright. Physical dominance is only one measure. The king wouldn't have noticed you if you were truly weak." She'd glanced at me then, something almost like curiosity in her expression, though I confess, I'm eager to discover what he saw in you that night. What made his wolf react so strongly to someone so unassuming? The word stung, but it was accurate. I was unassuming, forgettable. Or I had been, before everything changed. Now, as we passed through the city gates and into the royal district, I felt the weight of my decision settling over me like a physical thing. I'd left behind everything familiar. Not that there'd been much to leave. My father had barely acknowledged my departure, too busy calculating whether maintaining some connection to me might still prove useful. Bethany had sneered. Linda had looked relieved to have one less mouth to feed. Only one person had seemed genuinely affected by my leaving. Old Martin, the pack's groundskeeper, who'd occasionally shown me small kindnesses over the years, had pressed a worn book into my hands as I'd climbed into Lydia's vehicle. "My wife's favorite," he'd said quietly. "Poetry. For when the world gets too loud and you need to remember who you are." The book sat in my lap now, my thumb tracing its cracked spine as we approached the royal complex's main entrance. Guards in formal uniforms flanked massive iron gates that swung open at our approach. Beyond them, a courtyard stretched vast and manicured, fountains dancing in the afternoon light. "We'll enter through the east wing," Lydia explained, as our vehicle glided to a stop before a smaller entrance. "Your quarters have been prepared in the visitors section. You'll have time to settle in before dinner, which you'll take in your rooms tonight. Tomorrow, the real work begins." "What work?" "Preparing you for court. Etiquette, history, politics, self-defense, everything you'll need to navigate this world without getting devoured." She gathered her papers efficiently. "The king requested that you be given time to adjust before any formal meetings. He's occupied with council business for the next few days anyway. But make no mistake, Miss Wright, every moment you're here, you're being watched and evaluated." The rooms I'd been assigned were larger than my entire family's living quarters back home. A sitting area with plush furniture, a bedroom with a bed so massive I could have fit 5 people in it comfortably, a private bathroom with fixtures that gleamed like jewelry. Windows overlooked gardens where wolves in both human and animal form moved through carefully designed landscapes. "Unpack," Lydia instructed. "Rest if you can. Someone will bring dinner at 7. Tomorrow morning, your education begins." Then she was gone, leaving me alone in luxury I'd never imagined, let alone experienced. I walked slowly through the rooms, touching things cautiously as if they might vanish if I gripped too hard. Soft blankets, real art on the walls, books lining a shelf, actual books, expensive ones with gilded pages. My few belongings looked pathetic when I unpacked them. 3 changes of clothes, all worn and faded. The book Martin had given me, a small wooden wolf my mother had carved before she died, one of my only memories of her. And the phone Garrett had given me, still silent, still waiting. I stood at the window as the sun set, watching the grounds below transform. Lights flickered on across the complex. Wolves emerged for evening runs, their forms sleek and powerful as they raced through designated areas. I saw groups gathered on terraces, heard distant laughter and conversation carried on the wind. Somewhere in this vast complex, the Alpha King was going about his business. Did he know I'd arrived? Did he care? Or had Lydia been sent to handle me the way one handles any administrative task, efficiently and with minimal disruption to more important matters? My wolf whimpered softly, sensing my doubts, but she didn't retreat. She stayed present, watching, waiting for something I couldn't name. Dinner arrived precisely at 7, delivered by a young beta woman who introduced herself as Marie. She set the covered dishes on the sitting room table with practiced efficiency, her expression carefully neutral even as her eyes catalogued every detail about me. "If you need anything, use the phone by the bed," she said. "Someone from house staff will respond. Breakfast is at 7. Lydia will collect you at 8. She left before I could ask any of the 1,000 questions crowding my throat. The food was incredible. Roasted meat in rich sauce, vegetables I didn't recognize, bread so fresh it steamed when I broke it open. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, trying to remember the last time I'd had a meal this good. I couldn't. That night, I dreamed of running, not in fear, but in joy. My wolf form sleek and strong beneath me, racing through forests with moonlight silvering the path ahead. And in the dream, I wasn't alone. A larger wolf ran beside me, his fur dark as midnight, his presence warm and solid and safe. When I woke just before dawn, I could still feel the phantom sensation of pack, of belonging, of home. But the empty rooms reminded me it had only been a dream. Lydia arrived at 8 sharp, accompanied by a severe-looking woman she introduced as Madame Chen, my etiquette instructor. What followed were the longest, most exhausting days of my life. I learned how to address different ranks of wolves, the precise angles of deference expected for each. Learned which fork to use for which course during formal dinners, how to walk in heels without falling, how to make conversation without revealing too much or too little. Madame Chen was merciless, correcting even the smallest errors with sharp raps of her wooden pointer against the table. "Again," she'd say when I fumbled a formal greeting, "an omega of the court must be flawless. You represent not only yourself but His Majesty's judgment. Any weakness reflects on him." The pressure was crushing, but I persisted, driven by something I couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or spite, determination not to prove everyone right who'd said I didn't belong here. In the afternoons, I studied history with a patient scholar named Thomas, learning about the kingdom's formation, the territories and their ruling families, the complex web of alliances and enmities that shaped politics. My head spun with names and dates and genealogies. "The king's line goes back 12 generations, Thomas explained, pointing to a family tree that looked more like a forest. "Each ruler has shaped the kingdom differently. King Caden is unique. Younger than most when he took the throne, after his father's death in the Rogue Wars. He's ruled with an iron fist in some ways, surprising mercy in others. The court is divided on him. Some think he's too harsh, others that he's not harsh enough." "What do you think?" I asked. Thomas smiled slightly. "I think he's exactly what we need. But that doesn't mean everyone agrees with me." Evenings were reserved for self-defense training with a grizzled warrior named Beck, who seemed to take personal offense at my complete lack of combat skills. "You're small," he announced on the first day, circling me like a predator assessing prey. "Weak. Slow. If someone attacks you, you'll die. Thank you for the encouragement," I muttered. His laugh was sharp. "Don't want encouragement. Want you alive. So we make you dangerous in other ways. Speed, surprise, dirty fighting. Forget honor. Honor gets Omegas killed. We teach you to survive." He was true to his word. By the end of the first week, I was covered in bruises, my muscles screaming from exertion I'd never experienced, but I was also learning how to spot weaknesses, where to strike to cause maximum damage, how to use my size as an advantage rather than a liability. "Better," Beck grunted, after I'd successfully dodged one of his strikes and landed a blow to his kidney. Still terrible, but better. I collapsed on the training mat, gasping. "Do you ever give real compliments?" "Real compliment is you're not dead. Now get up." Again. Through all of this, I saw nothing of the Alpha King. He remained conspicuously absent, occupied with council meetings and territorial inspections, and a dozen other responsibilities that kept him far from my corner of the complex. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was here to learn regardless. But the phone in my pocket felt heavier each day, and my wolf grew restless with waiting. 2 weeks into my stay, everything changed. I'd just finished an afternoon history session with Thomas when Lydia appeared in the doorway, her expression more animated than I'd ever seen it. "Come with me," she said without preamble. "The king has returned early from his northern inspection. He's requested your presence in the private gardens immediately." My heart lurched. "Now?" Yes, now. And Miss Wright? She paused, something almost like sympathy crossing her face. Don't overthink this. Just be yourself. It's what caught his attention in the first place. The private gardens were exactly that. A secluded section of the grounds accessible only to the royal family and their personal guests. High hedges created natural walls, offering privacy while allowing glimpses of the wider world beyond. A path of white stones wound between beds of flowers I couldn't name, leading to a central courtyard where a fountain played softly. He stood with his back to me, watching the water, still dressed in travel clothes that somehow looked both casual and regal. My wolf surged forward with recognition, with joy, with relief so profound it made my knees weak. Then he turned, and the expression on his face stole whatever breath I had left. He looked tired. Shadows darkened the skin beneath his eyes. Tension carved lines around his mouth. But when his gaze found me, something in him eased, a letting go of weight he'd been carrying, if only for a moment. Elena. My name and his voice still sounded different. Important. Your Majesty, I said, offering the formal curtsy Madame Chen had drilled into me. His jaw tightened. Don't. Not when we're alone. Just come here. I walked toward him slowly, hyper-aware of every step, every breath. When I stopped an arm's length away, the proper distance for informal royal audiences according to etiquette lessons, he made a frustrated sound and closed the gap himself, his hands coming up to frame my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his reputation. 2 weeks, he said quietly, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones. I've been gone 2 weeks, handling problems that couldn't wait, and every day I thought about you. Wondered if you were settling in, if you were being treated well, if you'd changed your mind and left. I wouldn't leave, I whispered. I signed a contract. Forget the contract. His expression turned fierce. I don't want you here because of papers and obligations. I want you here because you choose to be. Because you feel what I feel when we're close like this. And I did feel it. That pull, that recognition, that sense of 2 puzzle pieces finally finding their match. My wolf sang with it, and for the first time since my rejection, I felt whole. I feel it, I admitted. But I don't understand it. Why me? Why would the moon goddess pair you with someone so, if you say, worthless, or weak, or any other lie you've been taught to believe about yourself? I'm going to be very unhappy. His fingers tightened slightly against my face. Not painfully, but firmly enough to command attention. You survived rejection. Survived years of being treated as less than nothing. Survived Elena, and you're still kind, still capable of compassion. Do you know how rare that is? How strong you have to be to endure what you've endured without becoming cruel yourself? Tears burned behind my eyes. I blinked them back. The court thinks I'm a mistake, I said. I can feel it. The way people look at me during training sessions. The whispers that stop when I enter a room. They don't understand why you'd choose me. The court doesn't need to understand. This is between us and the moon goddess. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my face. But I'll be honest with you, Elena, this won't be easy. There are wolves here who will see you as a weakness to exploit, others who'll test you constantly, waiting for you to fail. And I can't protect you from all of it without undermining the very strength I know you have. So what do? You stand. You endure. And you let me stand beside you when the weight gets too heavy to carry alone. He pulled back slightly, his dark eyes searching mine. Can you do that? Can you be strong enough to accept help when you need it? The question caught me off guard. I'd spent my whole life learning to need nothing, to ask for nothing, to expect nothing. The idea of accepting help, of admitting vulnerability, felt dangerous. But looking at him, at the hope and fear and fierce determination in his expression, I realized something. He needed this too. Needed me to trust him the way he was trusting that I wouldn't shatter under the pressure ahead. I can try, I said. His smile transformed his face, turning him from intimidating Alpha King into something almost boyish. That's enough, he said. For now, that's enough. He kissed me then, soft and careful, as if I were something precious that might break. And in that moment, surrounded by flowers and fountains and the promise of something I'd never dared to hope for, I finally let myself believe it. I was enough. The weeks that followed became a careful dance between private moments and public scrutiny. Caden, he'd insisted I call him that when we were alone, made time for me despite his crushing schedule. Early morning walks through the gardens before the court awakened. Late evening conversations in the library, where he'd show me maps of territories he'd visited, telling stories that made distant places feel real and close. Stolen hours where we learned each other in the way new lovers do, cautiously and completely, building something fragile and fierce between us. But the court watched everything. The Omega seems to think she belongs here, I heard someone whisper during a formal dinner I'd been required to attend. I'd been seated at a lower table, away from Caden, who presided at the head with council members flanking him. Look at her, trying so hard with her etiquette, as if manners can make up for weak blood. I'd kept my expression neutral, the way Madame Chen had taught me, and continued eating with precise, practiced movements. But the words burrowed under my skin, finding the soft places where my insecurities lived. The real test came 6 weeks after my arrival, during the Autumn Council, a gathering where representatives from all major territories convened to address kingdom business. Caden had wanted to exclude me from the proceedings, to protect me from the political warfare that characterized these meetings. But Lydia had advised otherwise. If you shield her completely, they'll say she's weak, she'd argued during a strategy session I'd been allowed to observe. If she attends and holds her ground, she proves she can function in this world. It's a risk either way, but one path leads to respect. The other leads to dismissal. So I found myself seated in the Grand Council chamber, surrounded by alphas and high-ranking wolves from across the kingdom, all of them radiating power and confidence I could only mimic. Caden sat at the chamber's head, his expression carved from granite as he directed discussions about border security, trade agreements, and territorial disputes. I tried to make myself invisible, to simply observe without drawing attention, but 2 hours into the session, everything changed. If we might address another matter, came a smooth voice from the left side of the chamber. I recognized the speaker, Lord Rothgar, an influential alpha from the Eastern Territories whom Lydia had warned me about. There's been considerable discussion regarding His Majesty's recent, personal decisions. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Caden's expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tighten fractionally on the armrest of his chair. Elaborate, he said, his voice dangerously soft. The court has noted your interest in Miss Wright. Rothgar's smile was pleasant, poisonous, an Omega from an insignificant pack, previously rejected by her intended mate. Forgive my directness, Your Majesty, but many wonder if this association serves the kingdom's best interests. The Alpha King's chosen companion reflects on us all. Stability requires strength, and strength requires appropriate pairings. Silence crashed through the chamber. Every eye turned to me, assessing, judging, waiting to see how I'd react. My wolf snarled, wanting to defend herself, but I forced her down. Showing aggression here would only prove their point, that I was too weak, too broken to belong. But before I could respond, Caden spoke. Lord Rothgar. Each word fell like stones into still water. You presume to judge the moon goddess's wisdom, to question whom she marks as suitable. I presume nothing, Your Majesty. I simply voice concerns shared by many regarding what? Caden stood, and the sheer dominance radiating from him made several wolves, including Rothgar, flinch. Regarding whether an Omega who survived rejection and 2 years of isolation, who traveled here alone despite having every reason to refuse, who trains daily to learn skills most of you were born knowing, whether she's strong enough to stand beside me. He descended from the platform, moving through the council chamber with lethal grace. When he reached my seat, he extended his hand. Stand up, Elena. I took his hand and rose, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone must hear it. He kept hold of me, turning us both to face the assembled council. You want to discuss strength? Caden continued. Let me tell you about strength. Strength isn't just dominance in battle. It's endurance, survival, The ability to face rejection and humiliation and cruelty and still choose compassion over bitterness. My intended mate has more of that kind of strength than most wolves in this room will ever possess. Your intended... Hrothgar's face paled. Your Majesty, you've made a formal decision? I have. Caden's arm moved around my waist, claiming me publicly, unmistakably. Elena Wright is my chosen mate. The bond between us is genuine, blessed by the moon goddess herself. Any wolf who questions this questions not my judgment, but the will of fate itself. The chamber erupted. Voices rose in shock, protest, a few even in support. Through the chaos, I stood frozen, processing what he'd just done. He'd claimed me. Publicly. Irrevocably. There was no taking it back now. No quiet dissolution if things didn't work out. The Autumn Council is concluded, Caden announced, his alpha command cutting through the noise like a blade. Lord Hrothgar, you will remain. The rest of you are dismissed. The council filed out in tense silence, their whispers already building like approaching thunder. Caden kept his arm around me until the last wolf departed and the massive doors sealed shut. Then he turned to face Hrothgar, who stood his ground despite the fear I could smell rolling off him. You challenged my mate in open council, Caden said quietly, questioned her worth, her strength. Explain to me why I shouldn't interpret that as a challenge to me personally. Hrothgar's throat worked. I meant no disrespect to your Majesty. I simply spoke concerns that you and others have been cultivating since Elena's arrival. Caden's voice remained soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. Did you think I wouldn't notice? The whispers, the small cruelties, the attempts to isolate her, to make her feel unwelcome, to drive her away before the bond could solidify. Your Majesty, you're afraid. Caden moved closer to Hrothgar, and I watched the older alpha's dominance crumble. Afraid of change. Afraid that an Omega who survived rejection might inspire other, lesser wolves to believe they deserve better treatment. Afraid that compassion might become valued alongside aggression in this court. And you're right to be afraid, Hrothgar. Because everything is about to change, he gestured toward the door. You have one warning. Accept what's coming, or remove yourself from court permanently. Choose. Hrothgar fled, his dignity in tatters. The moment we were alone, Caden's intensity fractured. He turned to me, searching my face with something close to desperation. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't plan to announce it like that. I wanted to tell you first, ask you properly, give you time to... I kissed him, cut off his rambling apology with my mouth on his, pouring everything I felt into that contact. Gratitude, fear, hope, and the beginning of something that might, eventually, become love. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, I found my voice. Yes, I said simply. Yes? Yes, I'll be your mate. Your queen, if that's what this means. Yes to all of it, even though I'm terrified and probably going to make 1,000 mistakes. Yes, Caden. His smile could have lit the entire kingdom. He lifted me effortlessly, spinning us both in a circle before setting me down and kissing me again, deeper this time, claiming and celebrating and promising all at once. The formal mating ceremony took place 3 months later, giving me time to complete my training, and the court time to adjust to the inevitable. It wasn't easy. Several families withdrew from court in protest. Others tested me constantly, looking for cracks in my composure. But gradually, imperceptibly, things shifted. Beck announced one day that I'd officially graduated from completely helpless to might survive 5 minutes in a real fight, which I'd learned to interpret as high praise. Madame Chen actually smiled when I executed a perfect formal greeting to a visiting dignitary. Thomas gave me books from his personal collection, marked with notes in the margins. And slowly, carefully, I made allies. Marie, the beta who'd delivered my first dinner, became a friend who taught me the informal hierarchies that governed palace life. A young Omega named Iris, recently arrived from the Southern Territories, attached herself to me like a shadow, and I discovered the strange joy of mentoring someone even more lost than I'd been. The ceremony itself was held under the full moon, traditional and binding. I wore white, Caden's choice. my hair left loose down my back in defiance of fashion. When he marked me, claiming me before the moon goddess and assembled witnesses, the bond snapped into place with such intensity I gasped. Suddenly I could feel him in my mind, his emotions tangling with mine, his wolf recognizing mine with joy that transcended words. Mine, his wolf declared. Ours, mine corrected, and felt his amusement ripple through the bond. The celebration lasted 3 days. Wolves from every territory attended, bearing gifts and grudging respect. Even some who'd opposed the match publicly offered private congratulations, acknowledging what had become obvious to anyone paying attention. Caden and I fit together in ways that defied logical explanation. On the third night, as festivities wound down and guests began departing, Caden found me on the private terrace outside our chambers. Our chambers now, shared and permanent. "Tired?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on top of my head. "Exhausted," I admitted. "Happy, terrified. All of it at once." "Good. That means you're alive." His arms tightened. "I have something for you. A wedding gift I've been saving." He produced a small wooden box, worn smooth with age. Inside lay a simple pendant, a silver wolf mid-leap, delicate and beautiful. "It was my mother's," he explained quietly. "She died when I was young. My father gave this to her when they mated. Said it represented everything she was, graceful, fierce, free. I want you to have it." Tears pricked my eyes as he fastened it around my neck. "Caden, you gave me something I thought I'd lost," he interrupted. "Hope. The possibility of being known completely and accepted anyway. Let me give you this. Let me give you everything." I turned in his arms, studying the face I'd come to love. Sharp edges and careful control with gentleness underneath that he showed only to me. "I was so certain I was broken," I whispered. "After the rejection, I thought I'd never be whole again, never be enough for anyone. You were always whole," he corrected, just waiting for someone who could see it. We stood together as the moon climbed higher. Two souls who'd found each other against impossible odds. Behind us, the palace glowed with lingering celebration. Ahead lay challenges I couldn't yet imagine. Ruling beside him, navigating court politics, proving myself worthy of the title I'd been given. But in that moment, wrapped in his arms with his mark warm on my neck and our bond singing between us, I felt something I'd never experienced before. I felt home. 3 years later, I stood in the same council chamber where Hrothgar had challenged me, but everything had changed. I wore deep blue now, the color of the Queen's office, with Caden's mother's pendant resting against my collarbone. My hair was pinned in the elaborate style favored by court, though I'd insisted on leaving a few loose strands, a small rebellion that made Caden smile whenever he noticed. "The orphanage proposal has been approved," I announced to the assembled council, my voice steady and clear. "Construction will begin in the Eastern Territories next month, with plans to expand to other regions as funding allows. Any child rejected by their pack will have a place to go. Education, training, protection." Lord Hrothgar, who'd chosen to stay and adapt rather than leave, nodded slowly. "A wise initiative, Your Majesty. The kingdom benefits when no wolf is wasted." I caught Caden's eye across the room and felt his pride through our bond, warm and sustaining. After the council dismissed, he found me in the library where we'd spent so many hours learning each other. "Queen Elena the Reformer," he teased, pulling me into his arms. "Who would have thought the invisible Omega would change the entire kingdom?" "I'm not invisible anymore," I pointed out. "No," he agreed, kissing my forehead. "You never were. Some of us just needed to learn how to see." Through the windows, I could see young wolves training in the courtyard. Omegas and alphas and betas working together, learning from Beck, who'd expanded his program to include anyone who wanted to learn self-defense. Iris led a group of newly arrived wolves on a tour of the grounds, her confidence a mirror of the encouragement I'd given her. The kingdom wasn't perfect. Challenges remained. Old prejudices died hard, and there were still wolves who questioned my place beside Caden, but things were changing. Slowly, steadily, the definition of strength was expanding to include survival, compassion, and the courage to be vulnerable. And I, the rejected Omega who'd once thought herself worthless, stood at the center of that change, held steady by the mate who'd seen me when I was invisible, and loved me when I'd forgotten how to love myself. "What are you thinking about?" Caden asked, studying my expression. I smiled, leaning into his warmth. That the moon goddess knew exactly what she was doing when she brought me to that hall, when you ordered them to bring me to your room. "Best order I ever gave," he murmured. "Best decision I ever made," I replied, and in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by evidence of everything we'd built together, I finally understood what it meant to be enough. Not because someone had chosen me, but because I'd chosen myself, and that made all the difference.